curious. There. She followed him and soon found herself falling a very deep hole into a strange place called Curious.
Conversation.
Curious.
Conversation.
Nowadays, there are still girls and boys whose curiosity leads.
So, to get this started, I prefer everyone to do their own introduction. And how I'd like to go around is just if everyone want to state your name. I feel like in your business, like what your business is here, I feel what would be best, especially with the three of you, because a lot of this will be around intention, connection, ceremony, transmissions, is not only the name of your business and what it does, but why the name of your business.
Yeah.
So Elise, would you like to start?
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Elise. My business name is Madlore. So essentially, I like to think of myself as an alchemist. I channel elixirs, so different elixir blends that are all herbal and floral. Mm-hmm. But what comes through for me first is actually the name of the elixir. So, for example, I have one that's called Contemplating Mortality. And, you know, just like the energy of those words together, it's quite poetic and it does, you know, evoke a feeling within, you know, the people that do hear those words together. And so, yeah, I alchemize that poetry into a herbal and fruit and floral blend for people to consume in alcohol form. And this is what I do with Madlore, essentially. So all of the elixirs that I channel are called an ode to something. And all of the elixirs are devoted to either a god or archetype or a person that I have, you know, worked with on my own spiritual evolution. And sorry. The name Madlore is really important for me because it holds such a really strong masculine presence, and it's always kind of there supporting me. But the reason that I've chosen the name Madlore is it's kind of an oxymoron in a way. So it's this whole project, this whole brand is an ode to madness, and you know, because the way that I describe what it is that I do, it might not make sense to the logical mind. But when people feel the medicine, they do understand it. So it's an ode to madness. And then lore, Lore, is, you know, around like herbal lore and, you know, using all of the magical properties that these herbs hold. But then it's also a play on LAW, like the law, like this is correct. So, you know, that's why I like to think of it as an oxymoron, because like my life is all about integrating paradox, I suppose. And, you know, the reason that, you know, I'm putting Madlore into the world is because I want people to grow the ability to be able to hold two polar opposite opinions. And I feel like this is the place that I find my own personal strength from. So that's me, and that's what my brand is about.
Beautiful. Thank you, Elise. And so wonderful you saying the word paradox in there, as just before we jumped on, I read over everyone's bios and everyone had these certain paradoxes of two things that don't go together that just so magically weave together when I think of the people that we're talking here. So I feel like that might be a big theme that we'll continue to talk about. Joel, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I'm Joel Camp. My business is Earth Blessings. I largely make teas, tinctures, extracts of the more medicinal variety. But because I have such an interest in, I guess, teacher plants and plant spirits in general, I have included a large range of teacher spirits and energetic plants in which to be worked with. The reason I chose earth blessings is because I feel that that's what our connection to the natural world is, and that's what the world around us gives us, is constant blessings. You know, like we have all of these incredible medicines, and they all are medicines to some degree, that are available to us and from the natural world. And most of our pharmaceuticals are derived from these substances. So it's I guess, coming back to our natural roots and understanding the medicine and the depth of the medicines available to us.
Yeah, again, something that I just read across the three of your bios and websites is just the coming back and remembering our sacred ways, the traditions, the ways that we were before we came so like we became capitalized and there was bigger industries within the medicine world. So yeah, that's a big talk. I feel like it's going to come across.
And so I guess a lot of what I try to do is weave those traditional, I guess, plant or herbal medicines, you know, like Ayurveda and Taoism, a lot of African and indigenous Australian medicines, and incorporate them with a lot of Northern and Eastern European medicines and influences, and especially like those that draw from pagan practices, herbcraft and witchcraft. So that way each medicine has a physical and a spiritual element to it.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you.
Caiyu.
Firstly, thank you for having us here and holding this container, Paisley.
Pleasure.
Also, big hello to you, Joel, formally, and you, Elise, and of course to our listeners. So my name is Caiyu. To encapsulate what I do in this context, I tend to say that I'm a ceremonialist, a student of plant medicine, a student of sacred medicine. I am the host of a podcast, which is called Birdsong with Caiyuda Kiora, my name. And I'm also the founder of medicinepath.net. And both these two creative explorations are really all about exploring what it means to walk a path aligned to shamanism, nature-based spirituality, earth-honoring traditions, ceremony, ritual, rites of passage, myth, storytelling, health and wellness. And within that is tied in this central thread, which is remembering and honoring the sacred ways. So Birdsong, the reason that name came about is because I have a deep affinity with what you might call our skyward allies. And when we do look to the wisdom that can be found within our feathered companions, we see that no bird refrains from singing its song. It's not worried about what the other birds are doing or singing in the morning. They awake each and every morning as the sun's rising over eastern horizon, and they sing their song. They warble, they twitter, they make their sound to their own unique pulse, you know, the pulse of their own unique song. So I say that if we tune into the whistles on the wind, if you will, or the breath of the wild, there's always something there for us to learn when it comes to tuning in to the birds. And when we slot that into the podcast format, of course, there's always something for us to learn through having conversations with others. And when it comes to the medicine path as well, the reason that the name medicine path comes into it, I mean, that's multi-layered as well. We're talking about sacred medicines, walking the sacred medicine path. But if I was to try and really encapsulate that concisely, I guess I would say that the medicine path to me is a path where we are aligning to our heart's calling and our soul's essence and our wild wisdom within, our spirit within. And we are recognizing that with the right perception, there is medicine to be found within everything. So in as concise a way as I can put it, that's kind of me in a nutshell.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kai. I love your transmission already right now. Just looking at your video here, you can tell that you host a podcast. Like you've got the setup and just the way you're weaving words and conducting yourself is very like I run my own podcast too.
It's an interesting thing being on the other end.
Other end, yeah. I've done a few, like before I started hosting this one, and I had forgot about them. And then as soon as this launched, a whole bunch of people were like, hey, next week your podcast is coming out. Your podcast is coming out. I was like, oh, I'm like really promoting mine right now. And now all of a sudden I have all these other ones I'm featuring on. So it's quite fun. Something you said within there is about just like our own inner knowing, the inner knowing and following the path and finding the medicine in everything. And this is quite fascinating for me. It's always the polarity. I'm going to just I'll shoot this question to you first, is like the polarity that I'm constantly in of this like inner knowing versus just being full of shit, you know, just not knowing anything at all. For me, like, especially like, for instance, I show up here and I do this as a just off the dome. Like, I don't prepare questions. Is that just a lack of putting in the work and spending my time and studying, and or is it just like I just know what I'm fucking doing? And this is people that work with plant medicine and are quite intuitive people. They listen within and study nature. I know if I take psychedelics, I just sit there and I watch nature, or if I'm just meditating without fucking like any kind of psychedelics, any plant medicine, I sit there and I watch. I'm like, nature just knows what to do. Does a tree sit there and have to study the other tree as it's growing to know how to do it, or does it just do it? And I'm constantly caught in this polarity of like, I need to know, I need to be logical versus I need to follow what my soul knows. I'm curious to hear about on your path. From what I read, you've been on this path for over 10 years. How you are keeping that balance in check and where that story flares up in your life around my intuitive knowing versus like, I haven't actually studied any of this shit at all.
So when we're talking about the path of shamanism, or rather I should say when I'm talking about the path of shamanism, really there are many core pillars. And one of those is recognizing that what we're working with is energy. Everything is energy. And I think having traversed this path for such a long time, the intuitive knowing, which is related to the awareness of energy, kind of precedes everything. And it's the rational, logical mind that comes in and with its language and capacities and puts the reasoning or the rationality onto everything first. And for me, and I'm sure all of you guys will resonate with this, it's all about integration. And it's a constant dance of having the awareness placed up in the head, in the logical, the rational, the reasoning mind, or being in the heart, being connected to intuition, about having the awareness in a very contemplative, meditative state, an inner state, while being connected to the outer. So it's like you mentioned when Elise was talking in the beginning, it's about the paradox, and it's about holding the paradox and not seeing things from the black and the white and the either or, but just recognizing that navigational dance between all things. And I think as we go down the path, the medicine path, and as we strip away or we become more aware, we illuminate a lot of the conditioning and the patterns and programs that have been placed onto us, we become more in tune with the energy, and we can navigate those worlds with more finesse and more grace. And what that means is being integrated with the mind, with the heart, with the soul, with the animal, flesh, sensuous body. So that's what comes to mind when you say that.
Yeah, it's the dance, definitely for me, that I hear that's so prominent. And there's always a moment where someone is leading in the dance. Is it your head or your heart or your soul, or is there a moment where no one's in control and it's that magical moment where you're not sure who's leading anymore, but it's flowing correctly? And sometimes there's moments where it's not, and you've just got to surrender to that. that's something I, again, so curious about when it comes to channeling and going, okay, I'm gonna follow this channel that I'm receiving right now, and knowing that Madlore is new to you, Elise. How was that for you, receiving the channel to say, hey, I'm going to do conscious alcohol? Because it's not just the average thing people are just downloading on a daily, you know? How was that for you as you were receiving it, and how did that dance unfold for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. For me personally, I've always worked with alcohol. My background is in hospitality. So I've always had, for over 15 years now, I've had a deep affinity with like wine, and it took me quite a while to realize that this was actually my purpose. But, I suppose like when I've looked into how my life has unfolded and everything that's led me to this point, it just makes so much sense. And, when I talk about like these metaphors or this poetry that I channel, that's the way that I relate with life as an entity. So I'll always have, I've had this ability to just decipher like the metaphors that life is showing me, and to be able to form my own awareness around what that means for me. And I also have a background in hypnotherapy, so that's how I taught myself how to channel. Essentially, it was by taking myself into like a self-hypnosis state, accessing my own subconscious, and then opening that up to the super consciousness. And what I found in that space was, this is the space of like the collective. Like I can access anything in here. It's quite similar to meditation. It's, essentially the same thing. But yeah, on what you guys were speaking about before, I've also struggled with the trust around, my own deep inner knowing. And so I have worked with, plant medicine before, and working, like doing dietas and things like that. And, you always do feel the spirit of the plant within your body when you ingest it. And lately I've been just working with like ingesting like a tea, or even just tuning into the energy of a plant, and then trying to feel their medicine and what it is that they want to show me and what they want to be used for in elixirs. And I'll find that quite often the medicine that they hold and what I feel from them is really spot on. But I find that quite often I'm still, going back to books and like looking up the magical properties of these particular herbs. And most of the time I'm like spot on in terms of what I've felt from their energy, but it's still like, that constant like back and forth, like, is this deep inner knowing true? Is it not? Can I trust this? And so yeah, it is challenging, but I feel like it's, a lovely thing to keep pushing at and overcome.
Yeah, beautiful. That's I like that as well, like if you're able to channel that yourself, but you can get confirmation somewhere, I don't think it's hurting. I don't think it's detrimental. And it's wonderful that that is out there somewhere and that you're able to tune that yourself. So yeah, I find that so wonderful. I believe I need to do that a bit more, is like actually go, hey, I might just like actually read a bit more around these connections that I have with, like for instance, I can see in the background of Caillou's room, I'm assuming it is, with all these black cockatoo feathers, and like I just have such a deep affinity for black cockatoos, and I've never really I know what my connection is. I feel like they're a living phoenix. I hear them, and I ever since a kid I've heard them. I always thought it was a phoenix from a child, like there's this magical rebirth happening at the moment. And I guess the translation for me was like, it's about to rain, and there is going to be a sort of a rebirth in this land. But I've never really sat and gone, oh, maybe I should read about what it is, the magical properties of of the black cockatoo, or what the traditional people of this land say about black cockatoos.
Yeah.
Anyways, tangenting.
It's tangenting. Oh, sorry. I was going to jump in and say, yeah, it's tangenting, but it's completely on topic as well, because what you're touching on when it comes to these threads, we're tapping into another core pillar of shamanism, and that is experiential knowing. It's not going to the intermediary, which is looking in the book and saying, what does this particular thing mean? Okay, yeah, I think I get it conceptually. And while that still has its benefits, obviously, we still need to test that out in the real world and go, is that true? But when we do have that experiential knowing, when you're seeing the black cockatoos fly over and they're bringing the reins behind them, or they're imparting some sort of feeling to you, you are gaining that direct experiential knowing from spirit, and that is infinitely more sacred than reading anything in a book.
Any text. Yeah, which is extremely true. It's the imposter syndrome that I feel like comes quite hand in hand in this day and age with any kind of shamanism, spiritual connection, channeling. I'm curious to know, just to continue the flow of it, like, Joel, have you had any kind of, you've just launched quite prominently Earth Blessing and created these tinctures, these bundles, these different ways of packaging and giving to people that also has a similar essence to Elise's, like the poetry of her drinks, her elixirs. Do you at any time collide with that imposter syndrome, or do you feel that you keep quite integral with what you're doing?
Largely, I feel I keep pretty integral with what I'm doing. None of the medicines that I would put or make available for anyone else is not something that I would work. I mean, it's all something that I work with myself. And so I figure if these medicines have helped me, then I will extend that. The plants want to be shared. Like they want to be in the hands of the people that need them and want them. And so I found in terms of integrity, I'm pretty solid with what I put out into the world. And I find it's benefit to me, so I feel it could be benefit to someone else. But in terms of the intuitive guidance versus the research or the book knowledge, for me, I like to keep a lot of balance. A lot of the teacher plants I work with are on the left-hand path, so I don't really shy away from the Solanaceae family, or the nightshades, the deadly nightshades, the belladonnas, the daturas, the brugmansias. And so as much as it's building a relationship with those plants and really getting to know them slowly and work with them on a real energetic and a soft level before you start moving into the altered states that they can produce. You kind of need to balance, I guess, the knowledge that's there, especially around the toxicity and ingestion methods, with ancient methods and self-exploration.
So there you said the left-hand path. I'd like to take a bit of a walk down there. Is, for instance, with the work that I do, one example being the funeral and these different rites of passage events that I do, people around me also know I connect with DMT a fair amount. Like I'm often out in the bush having some kind of dance with DMT. And that means people around me have started to ask me over the years to facilitate something as an offering with DMT. And my friends, I'll hold space for them, whatever, with the work that I do with it. But I'm like just a straight up no. Like, no. I will not charge someone. I will not hold a paid space for DMT, because I don't feel like though I've been dancing for years, like I don't feel like I can conduct it. I don't think I know the choreography of that dance to give to others. I'm curious to hear where those moments of ticking over come for you, where you go, okay, yep, I'm ready to actually hold this circle to facilitate this dance.
I guess much like yourself, I've been exploring my inner worlds for around 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd been facilitating smaller sits for friends and family.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't until the medicine itself tells me that it wants me to share it. And whether that's been like, I guess the main medicines I work with in that scape would be mescaline and psilocybin.
Mm-hmm.
And after those plants have given me that message that they want to be shared, then I will share them in open circle.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's such a simple answer. This when a plant tells you, and it's not really anything I want to do, but if it did tell me, yeah, maybe, but it's not something I just enjoy my own time with it. And Caiyu, that's, I guess, I'm actually curious to actually get the defining points that are different in this area of plant medicine versus like frog medicine, as in that's how I heard about you, is as people going and doing Cambo with you, is what is the defining point between it? Like, is frog medicine grouped in with plant medicine? Could you maybe give me a bit of a because that's what I guess I do, but it doesn't feel right at all. But I'm like, yeah, I guess because it has the same effect in certain ways. For instance, if it's 5-MeO-DMT with that frog, I'm like, well, it's so similar, but it's from a whole different species. Could you give me a bit of an understanding on that?
Yeah, totally. It's semantics. Hey, a lot of the sacred medicines or psychedelics certainly get lumped into the plant medicine category.
Yeah.
Even though, same with something like psilocybin mushrooms. People often refer to mushrooms as plant medicine. Clearly, it's a fungi.
Okay.
So frog medicine, it gets lumped into the same category as plant medicine, in terms of plant medicine being looked at through the lens of healing, spiritual expansion, those sorts of intentions of why people come to work with them in the first place. But in the same breath, it works in a completely different manner, as do all of these sacred medicines. It's like we could start to go down a pretty deep rabbit hole here when we're discussing what the pharmacological components are with all the medicines, what the physiological effects are that they have on the body, why people predominantly come to various medicines. But I'm not sure if that's where you want to take it. But just in regards to the frog medicine,
we're an open book. You go wherever you desire, and I'll catch you.
Yeah, look, well, that's all I wanted to say on the matter for now. Yeah, I'm not sure if you wanted to add anything to that, Joel or Elise.
No, that makes sense to me.
Yeah. So there is that lumping, and that's something I'm guilty of, and it's just due to not having the language and the academics around knowing what to label certain things. And you saying like the pharmaceutical world, how they've taken medicine and maybe created a different path that doesn't really show the healing properties that at its natural essence can do for us. And that's something I'm very curious to know with you, Elise, that narrative that you're going to be clashing with possibly of like alcohol as a medicine.
Yeah, it's interesting because obviously in the Western medicine arena, medicine is seen as, here's a pill, you take it to either mask your symptom or heal you. And usually when medicine is spoken about in that way from the Western perspective, it's always about the quick fix, or even simply fixing the problem. And I think that you know, when we're trying to skip so many steps in terms of like the healing process, that's when we run into problems, and that's when the symptoms are simply being masked rather than, you know, being healed from the core.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I speak about alcohol as a medicine, it's not, here, take this drink, this is going to heal your cancer, this is going to heal your broken heart, or whatever it is. It's not, take this and it's a quick potion fix.
Mm-hmm.
The medicine of alcohol is, it's a way to really crack our outer shell. It's a way to, you know, crack our hearts open, to just open up to more of the beauty of life. And I also always talk about alcohol as being a medicine for the shadow. So, you know, often we see when people drink quite, you know, excessively, or even just a little bit. I know for myself personally, it doesn't take me much to be initiated into the shadow self anymore. So, you know, we see people start to play out aspects of themselves that are not typically at the forefront all the time. So we see violence, we see people being overly sexual, we see people being overly loving if that's not in their natural nature, just as some examples. And so, you know, that's why I call alcohol a medicine for the shadow, because it brings it to the surface and it allows people to explore that part of themselves that perhaps they might not have been able to allow themselves to do at other times. And I have people journey with my elixirs because it does break through some of those barriers that they're holding on getting to those, you know, deeper parts of themselves. And yeah, I think that if we're looking at medicines in this way, it's not a quick fix, but it's even more beautiful because, you know, we're learning to initiate this for ourselves and, you know, take all these certain steps. And, you know, it's not just the alcohol that's the medicine. It needs to be paired with a certain level of awareness for it to be actually beneficial, because if we're not having that awareness, that's when it starts to become, out of alignment.
Yeah, I like that. And as someone that's experienced a few of your drinks, I'm not a drinker per se, as in someone that gets drunk. I haven't been drunk in many, many years. But like, I will have a red wine, you know, if I go out with some friends at dinner. I drink it slowly, but it's not consciously. It's sort of just like, as I would just, I'm not even the most conscious eater as well. I'm quite a person. I eat like a bit of a dog. I just, and that's okay. But when I have your drinks, like, I've sat there and it's taken me forever to even just finish like half a glass, because it's just like, just the tiniest sip goes in, and I just sat with it and like drank it, and it's like somewhat like intentionally unintentional, meaning that like I'm not purposely going, this is Elise's drink, this is a conscious alcohol, I have to be conscious about it. But it's just like sitting with some friends, we're having a few of the drinks, and I'm like, oh, I haven't drank anything. And unfortunately, like, I have a fridge full of them at the moment, because people somehow all of a sudden, you sent one for me to Phoenix, but then a whole bunch of friends that weekend came over.
Oh, that's so nice.
It was I think Scorpio full moon. The house had planned some kind of ritual, and a bunch of friends had come over, and just like, now there's like 20 bottles in the fridge of just different friends just happen to have your alcohol, and it's just all in there. And we've had it, you know, certain occasions from then on. And because it has this reverence about it, a lot of it has actually gone unfinished. It's sitting in the fridge. I need to throw it out because it's actually gone sour because we've drank it too slow. And in a manner of, not because we don't like it, but because we've revered it so much and just had just the littlest bit. I'm curious to know, one, if that's a review you've heard before, or two, like, if that's even something intentionally you put into it, that's like, this is going to be drank very slowly.
Yeah. I do really feel, oh, thank you for sharing that with me, first of all. That makes my heart so happy.
Yeah, because I want to keep the bottles as well. That's why I haven't done it, because I have to wash them out and everything, because the bottles are so beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, like the first and foremost intention for this brand and for my mission, like my mission is to bring consciousness and awareness back to alcohol. So I do believe that I have, infused the liquid with my intention. There's a lot of, like, I think a lot of people know about how liquid holds energy, especially water. It is my intention to infuse my intentions into this liquid of the alcohol. And like I said, one of the main intentions is that slow, thoughtful drinking and awareness. And I do really believe that that is part of like the medicine that I hold, because I do have a really like deeply developed sense of self-awareness and awareness around how I interact with life and other people. And, that's just what I want to transmit with these drinks. It's my medicine. As much as it's Madlore, it's my medicine as well. So, that's what it is. And I'm just so happy because, I wanted to, like, when I do like more batches for Madlore that's being released in October, I do want to sit with the liquid and actually go into ritual and imprint the liquid with its exact intention. And so hearing you share that, it just helps me, know that I'm on the right track, and that I, even if I don't intentionally sit and like, kind of inject the intention into it, it will go in anyway because it was already created with that intention. I'm really excited. I'm so happy.
Yes, I'm glad I got to tell you. There's something I said within there around like the beauty of the bottles itself and the logo. And there's, I believe, people that work with medicines and like intention, there's this like rites of passage, ritual, ceremony. There's a certain aesthetic that just goes with it. It just draws in people that are able to transmute beautiful aesthetics. I just want to throw this out to everyone. Like, it's not a big question. Just why? Why is aesthetic such a massive part of anything that is a medicine? Like, I look in the background of everyone's and there's some kind of sacred geometry going on. There's certain colors, there's certain jewels. Like, why is anything on a medicine path so aligned with beautiful aesthetics?
Well, I think it all comes back to set and setting. And when you're looking at, I guess, that broad strokes plant medicine, or as I'd like to think of them, teacher spirits, set and setting plays an integral part of the way that you approach and receive that journey. So I think set and setting follows suit into everything that surrounds it.
Do people that guide these certain spirit teachers, that are facilitators, that are curators, that are channelers, also know that they're artists? Is this like a common knowledge? I feel like you're an artist, right? Like, if you're facilitating these experiences, a big part of why I've been drawn to the journeys and why I love shamans, why I love shamanism, why I love paganism, why I love all these traditions and the medicines that go with it, even doing medicine, especially psychoactive ones, is like the art that comes with it. I'm like so consumed by it, but I don't know if everyone else sees these shamans, these medicine facilitators as artists. They're like, oh, shaman, alchemist, medicine person, but artists. Again, this is quite a vague question, but just like, are people recognizing the artist in yourselves as well? And do you see it in others, or is this just me in my own head?
I'll give my 2 cents.
Yeah.
Certainly. And I think walking this path for me and working with these teacher spirits, with these sacred medicines, a large part of that is shape-shifting in many, many different ways, because we are multidimensional beings, and so are the teacher spirits that we are engaging with. So we're quite naturally entering into some pretty multi-dimensional realms. And part of that is having that experiential recognition that we are everything. We're the artists, we're the creative, we are the shaman, we're the, pick whatever archetype that you want.
The beast, the priest, the lover, the list goes on.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what you were touching on before regarding beauty as well, I think that one of the really potent gifts that these sacred medicines have to offer is revealing the beauty within all. It's being able to see the sacred in everything, the sacred in the mundane. And I think when one experiences that, it certainly opens up the potential for that beauty to be reflected and embodied on a deep level. And that quite naturally comes out through many, if not all, of our creative expressions that we're really, really, really connected with, that we really, truly care about, and that are coming from a place of the heart and soul.
Yeah. Like, for instance, if I, like Caiyu, I don't know you extremely well, but the times of just observing you on social media, again, coming back to the black cockatoo, like I saw you made like a staff with the black cockatoo feathers, and I was like, that is like an incredible artistic piece there that could be in an expo. Like, that is, some people would have gone to art school for years and studied the composition of these different ways of articulating this feeling within them, or the way that art should look. But to my assumption, you're just like, this feels right here, this feels right there, I've collected this, I remember that thing I collected one time, I'll put that there, I'll carve this. Like, that it's quite intuitive. And I assume, this is what I love about it, is like, I wonder how many people that study art and are quite like brainy about it could watch certain people like everyone here and just be like, these motherfuckers, like they didn't study shit, and look at what they're doing, because I get that sometimes. If anyone, I'm like, fuck, they just channeled that as a magical piece of art, and I've been looking at this shit on like Pinterest boards and studying other people, and I want to create something, but I've held myself back because it's my brain that holds myself back, rather than just me. I need this stuff. These elements go together, done, and I'm just wondering, again, with this dance, this polarity that we continue to speak of, that I continue to bring up, is that like the permission of also allowing the artist through, because I know a lot of people have this story of like, oh, I can't be an artist. Like, if I'm looking in the background there, Chris, like, you got a guitar there. Like, do you ever come across moments being like, oh, I can't now be a guitarist, like I'm not that I'm not a musician, I'm a blah. Do you come across that?
No, I don't. I'm sure I have in the past, but no, not anymore. And I think that's just part of the playful quality that a lot of these sacred medicines have allowed me to tap into, especially having a 2-year-old daughter as well, and seeing her curiosity to all things in the world. And I think that's an important thing for me as well. Along this path, it has been that curiosity to not allow myself to be confined or defined by anything. And that's something that I really appreciate and find inspiration from you as well. Really riding those boundaries, walking those edges of society and culture, and exploring the taboo and the things that are cast out of the castle walls into the deep, damp forest that society and culture says that doesn't exist, or that's not allowed to exist.
Yeah, thank you. And there's like two prominent words that you've said previously that have allowed me to do that is the word shapeshifter, just being like, okay, like I'm not going to be any identity. And I really actually work quite hard to keep my platforms and my work in the vein of like, I'm not going down one certain path so I don't get hooked into one thing. And again, like, you know, maybe I'm asking you these questions because I've hooked you into a certain identity going, oh no, Caiyu is the medicine man, you know, he's not a musician, you know, but I revere it, I respect it. But yeah, I guess I asked is like, would you be comfortable selling a ticketed show that you are going to pick up the guitar and perform?
Would I be comfortable selling a ticketed show? No, I wouldn't be comfortable selling a ticketed show. And I think it's a strange question. It's not something that I have really probably contemplated all that deeply, but I suppose off the cuff, off the top of my head, it comes down to being in service and knowing how we're being in service in a way. It's like our soulfulness is finding its place within its ecological niche of society and culture. And in a way, that's kind of how I feel like I'm being of greater service in that way. And it's through this way of being in service that people are, you know, exchanging energy, whether that's financially or through other means to experience or to come and, well, I guess just come and experience what I have to offer with the world. So yeah, while I play guitar and I do, you know, many things as we all do, I think it's contextual. Like for the context of our conversation, yeah, it's like, okay, sure, ceremonialist, a student of plant medicine, sacred medicine, but hey, throw in all of the other 1,000,001 archetypes and roles and identities that I slip and slide into on a daily, weekly, yearly basis.
And it's like you said earlier, there's medicine in everything. And in this context of talking about music is a massive, massive medicine. So I was just thinking, Joel, with the few people that I know that have gone down the medicine path, and this sort of correlates as well what we're speaking with Elise earlier, is I've met a lot of medicine people that facilitate circles, that hold space with plant medicine spirit teachers that have previously gone down a more detrimental drug path with drugs. I'm curious to know why you believe that happens, and if you've seen that correlation with people that have had quite a problematic past with drugs to then finding drugs to be a medicine that actually can heal people that have previously been detrimental to their life.
I myself am a recovering addict. And I guess out of going through a lot of the normal rehab channels and finding sobriety, I went to plant medicines to help move through addictive cycles and rewire brain patterns and come to a better understanding of self and release the grief and the torment and the anger and everything that was driving me towards addictive tendencies in the first place. And so I think understanding the impact that the medicine can have on myself and changing I guess not necessarily the view from medicine to drugs, because medicine is drugs and drugs are medicine. Doesn't matter how you look at it across the entire medicinal platform. It comes down to intention. And the intention is never, I find with teacher spirits, the intention is never to get high. Because although, you know, we may have some really blissful and insightful experiences with psychedelics, we may have some really deep, heavy hallucinogenic experiences with some of the deliriants,
Mhm.
and then inebriant stimulants. You know, they all have their gifts, they all have their teachings,
Mhm.
but they're also done in a way or consumed in a way that it's not intoxication first.
Mm.
It's a searching for more, a better understanding of the outside world and your inside world.
Mm. Mm.
And I find that when I was in the grips of addiction,
Mm.
there was never a consideration for the world outside of what was happening inside my head.
Mm. Mm.
There was no connection to any other world, to any other realm.
Mm.
And I find that that's the main difference, the draw between drugs and drugs.
Mm. Mm. There's three things that have just spawned that I want to ask, and I hope that I can anchor them all in. One would be, so for my mentor that has the background in plant medicine, who was formerly an addict, their parents constantly on their back, not constantly, but have made remarks of like, you're still a drug addict. You know, you've just changed the drugs. Do you come up against that at all for yourself, or anyone else like externally giving that to you?
Occasionally, yes. But I always refer back to the fact that addiction implies habitual behavior.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the connection that I have with these plants and the frequency that I commune with these plants is far outside of habitual behavior. Therefore, it's non-addictive tendencies.
Mm-hmm. And the other one is continuing on the addict path is, I'm a massive fan of Russell Brand, and like for maybe 5-7 years now, he's been talking about on like every single podcast how much he wants to do DMT or ayahuasca or something like that, but he won't, because he's formerly an addict. And every time I'm screaming, I'm like, just do it. Like, it'll probably help you around your fear of actually being an addict.
100%.
100%. I want to know, like, if you had done it in the times of being an addict, done these like phenomenal plant medicines or spirit teachers such as DMT or ayahuasca, that beforehand and then afterwards, once you had recovered, and what realizations you had in there around addiction?
DMT and psilocybin, yes.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of LSD as well when I was in a place of using regularly.
Mm-hmm.
But I always approach them as a means of getting high.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There was never any respect for the medicine itself.
Mm-hmm.
There was never any respect for the experience itself. Like now I couldn't imagine sitting with 10 grams of psilocybin and going to a rave. But 20 years ago, that would be no problem, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it all comes back to greater reverence for the medicine.
So if Russell Brand were about to return the favor for all the times I listened to his podcast, and he was like, all right, I'll check out Paisley podcast, what would be your advice to Russell Brand right now?
If he feels cold to experience what DMT or ayahuasca or mescaline or psilocybin can do for rewiring and reconfiguring that addict brain, then it's probably the right thing for him to do. If he feels cold to it, there's obviously a reason for that. He understands that his brain needs to be recalibrated. And these medicines can offer the ability to break those addictive patterns.
Cool. So Russell, when you hear this and you want to come talk about it after you have the experience, just reach out. Elise, continuing on that like addiction path, obviously a lot of people have addictions to alcohol. Is that
Yes.
something that you have considered for yourself, being someone that wants to sell alcohol as a conscious choice, but that ways that people could possibly fall into that pattern with something that you are curating?
Yes, this is actually something that I struggled with for quite a while when I was conceiving this mission. And I personally have a background in drug and alcohol abuse, and I suppose that's one of the main reasons that I'm going ahead with this, and I feel so passionate about it. And I'd just like to explain a bit about my background in terms of that and how I've come to now feeling good about actually adding more alcohol to the market because it seems counterproductive. So the way that I view addiction is that it's always just a symptom for, an unmet need or a larger issue, a core issue. And on my own personal journey, I really heavily abused drugs in my early 20s. And then I managed to quit cold turkey because I just decided I didn't want to do it anymore. But instantly I replaced that addiction with alcohol, and I was drinking excessively every day for a few years. And then I got to the point where that was no longer serving me, and I also became pregnant. So, you can't drink alcohol when you're pregnant. And so I ended up taking a year off drinking alcohol. And in that time, I would bring awareness to when I was desiring to have a drink. So I'd bring an awareness to that and really go inside and ask myself, what's the unmet need here? What is it that I actually want? Because it was never a drink, it was always, I want to escape from my shitty life, or I, want to feel loved, or I want to feel warmth, or whatever it was to me. I would always dig into that, core issue. And then I would work on meeting that need in a healthier way, and that actually met the exact need instead of, just masking the symptom. So I worked with that for quite a long time, meeting that need. And I was actually able to reintroduce alcohol into my life in a more conscious way. And I know that in the the common way that people deal with addictions in AA and NA is that, once you're an addict, you're always an addict. And they never, they try their best to never touch a drop of alcohol or take drugs again. And I understand that that's helped and worked for so many people. But I do believe that, for some people, not everyone, that can be quite limiting of our human experience, because these drugs, these medicines and alcohol, they do have, medicinal, beneficial properties to them. And I feel like it's a shame that so many people just say that they can't ingest these things anymore because of their past. And, I really do feel like by saying that, we are projecting our human experience onto these medicines. It's the same as, a lot of people in the spiritual arena talk about money not being the root of all evil, like it's commonly known to be. And we need to unpack our beliefs around that to actually get back to the root of what it is. And we find when we clear all of our conditioning around that certain energetic construct, whether it's a drug or alcohol, money, whatever, you find the beauty and the medicine at the heart of that construct. And I feel like that's what I have done with alcohol. And that's why I want to share my message around the medicine of alcohol. And because I am putting it out into the world with my conscious intention of showing the medicine, that's how I've come to terms with actually, adding more alcohol to the market, which might seem like it's adding more problem, but it's really not. So that's where I think.
Yeah, wonderful. And that's something, it's beautiful to know that you've had your own journey around alcohol and drugs, because that's similar to me. When I was up into the age of 21, I had a drug problem too, which this is something also I'm curious to hear other people's thoughts, but I had a quote unquote overdose on psilocybin, which I don't know if you can actually overdose on, but I went in and out of consciousness, like, and I was out, you know. And for ages, I just fucking didn't touch psychedelics again, psychedelics were my drug of choice, because they felt more sustainable to me, and the come down wasn't as bad, and I was more connected in with things, even though I didn't really know about spirituality, but I did feel a spiritual essence around my journey. And it took ages until I started to, and since then, I've not really taken any heroic doses of anything. One time with DMT, I tried to take a quote unquote heroic dose, which was really just like one like proper cone piece worth of DMT, and that was just, it was too much for me. I couldn't grasp that journey. It was too much of a shock to my body. But there's been this whole new understanding of different, like alcohol and drugs, if we just label those two. So I'm like, wow, like I enjoy this so much more in smaller dosages, and I feel like I'm actually getting way more out of it because I'm so much more conscious and intentional, and there's no freaking out. Even though when I was younger, there was never a moment of freaking out. Like more was better. But like the more I flipped out and blah, it really was the high of that I was chasing. I'm curious to know of yourself, Caiyu, do you have this correlating past of problems with drugs and alcohol as the three of us seem to have had?
Yeah, totally.
Woo-hoo!
So I'm not sure.
Go team! Sorry, yeah.
No, that's all right. Yeah, I'm not sure if you know, but in a past life of mine, I used to play drums in touring bands around Australia.
Oh,
I was
cool.
a punk drummer, a pop punk drummer. That was my thing. That's all I wanted to do when I was a early adolescent teenager, all the way up until my mid 20s. So I always make the joke, if you know anything about the rock and roll lifestyle, you'll know that it's typically full of lots of naughty behavior. Yeah, the alcohol, the drugs, the late nights, you name it, the shitty food, all of the abusive tendencies, the mischievous adventures. And during that was a lot of experimentation with the drugs, as I mentioned, and somewhere along the line, psychedelics came into my field and I started exploring them. And it was psilocybin mushrooms that I first started exploring. And after this one particular magical encounter, it opened up my perspective to see that a lot of the people that I was friends with at the time weren't actually the type of people that I wanted to be friends with. But unfortunately, for my own sense of self or my own spiritual expansion at the time, I still had that heavy foot in the world of the rock and roll lifestyle with all of the abusive and unhealthy relationships and tendencies and everything that came with it. So the spark of awakening was really trying to blossom, but it took a while for that to really take hold. And after that particular psilocybin mushroom experience, I started growing them myself. So I converted a spare room into a fully decked out grow room with all your humidifiers, your heaters, timers, tubs, sterilizing stations, all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
And one particular time I laid down in bed after ingesting some mushrooms and I told myself that I just wanted to meditate. But in truth, all I wanted to do was see all the trippy kaleidoscopic patterns. That's really all I wanted. I just wanted to trip out. But it was this one particular experience which ended up being the most terrifying experience of my life at the time. And that ended up being the catalyst, albeit a slow one, to shift my view from psychedelics being purely recreational drugs to psychedelics being incredibly powerful sacraments. And with that experience came a lot of the cognitive learning through books and documentaries and that sort of thing to really gain more of a conceptual understanding that these were substances that had been used in a reverential, in a sacramental way for many, many thousands of years. So there were many pieces of puzzle that kind of allowed me to shift my perspective towards these things and come at it from a place of reverence. But that I did have quite a large hiatus in between that particular experience and a few other dabblings until I got to the point where I really started engaging with them as spirit teachers that really had something to teach me on a very, very deep level.
Yeah, so it sounds like a similar path that I experienced. And in
Totally.
saying that, like, for instance, one way that experience in your bed could be labeled is a bad trip, right? And I'm curious to hear everyone here is like thoughts on a bad trip. Do you believe there is a such thing as a bad trip? My philosophy is it's just something about ourselves that we're scared of facing. Like it's the shadow which the plant is offering you an opportunity to integrate and to move through, but it's fucking scary as hell. It's in your subconscious for a reason. We don't want to fucking deal with it. Or is it just like you just had a fucking bad batch or a bad trip or a blah, whatever you want to label it? Whoever wants to take this one, this is an open question.
Yeah, absolutely not. There's no such thing as a bad trip. Like you said, it's just you not being willing to accept, to integrate, and to recognize the shadow elements of yourself or whatever it is that you're moving through. It's the blind spot that you're not prepared to look at. And when you're forced to look at it, if you still try and run from that and not surrender to it and move towards it, you're going to experience a bad trip.
So what about the people that get stuck in these said bad trips? What are these people experiencing once the psychoactive part of the plant has stopped affecting you? Or is it still affecting you days, weeks, months later?
Did you want to jump in with something else to say there, Joel?
No, you take it, man.
I was going to piggyback onto what you were saying as well. Actually, I was going to challenge it, but only from the reference point of seeing it from a different perspective. Like, I totally agree with everything you're saying, but I would say that a bad trip does exist. And the reason why it does exist is precisely because of everything that you were talking about. It is because people don't have that lens of understanding to see that the experience that they've had is a lot of the shadow elements or the trauma that they're experiencing. So they are seeing it through the lens of a bad trip rather than an incredibly challenging, painful experience full of suffering that was horrendous, terrifying, all the rest of it that they can learn from. So I'd say that's the difference for me between, so we're on the same page, just a different way of
I would agree with that.
Yeah. Just different languaging.
Totally.
That's so just to continue on that, the second part of that question I asked is, and in your bio, Joel, the words of traveler of the poison path is in there, right? And I want to sort of unpack poison, because for a few reasons. One, being stuck in a trip, like what is this this poisoning happening to my mind, my psyche, whatever it is. Two is the thing of like, because I saw you saying, sort of nodding a no when I was saying, can you overdose on psilocybin? But like, if psilocybin is a poisonous effect, to my understanding, like, why can't I have any other poison and overdose on it, but I can't overdose on that?
Well, psilocybin, although it may seem to be poisoning the system, it's non-toxic.
Okay.
So to me, the difference between poisons and other medicines are the fact that although they may be poisonous, they may make you ill, they may stick you in places that you don't really like. You don't ultimately run the risk of death through toxicity. A lot of the poison path plants, the Solanase families, the Daturas, the Brugmansias, the Hensbanes, the true deliriants, and I guess when we're looking at teacher spirits and psychedelic or hallucinogenic plants, I like to think of your psychedelics in terms of the upper world or the cosmos, and then the deliriants, the more darker plants, they will take you into the underworld. They will take you right into the shadow spots. On large enough doses, you will actually both auditory, visually and audible, everything, complete hallucinations. And they'll take you into the things that aren't there. And they can be incredible teachers. If you overcross that fine boundary, though, they can lead to some pretty nasty demises.
Some other kinds of lessons that maybe one isn't ready to learn. Yeah. Cool. Do you have something to piggyback off the back of that, Caiyu? Looks, you may have something.
No, I don't.
Okay.
No.
Okay, cool. So continuing, I guess, like on that path, for instance, with Cambo, like I assume you've obviously come across this often, is like to, for instance, if I tell my dad about what Cambo is, and I don't have a massive understanding because I haven't done it, but to what I've sort of briefly learnt about it is like trying to tell someone that's like, hey, there's this frog that it's like a poison and you put it in your body and it helps purge you out and you vomit and all these things happen. Like, this doesn't sound super, like, it's not a really good marketing tool to be like, yeah, come, trust me, it's like the best vomit you'll ever have. Like, do you want to, like, I guess, just continuing on this path of poison, give a bit of reframing and understanding about this word poison and why it can also be beneficial for you rather than being the thing that's on the back of bottles that say, do not ingest, this is poisonous. Or this plant, if you eat this plant, you will die. Whatever it is.
Yes, it's been a little while since I've languaged this, but I will try and reach into the deepest corners of my mind and try and pull something out that's
I believe in you
enough for this conversation. So I have explored this to some reasonable depth in an article that I wrote maybe a year ago, and it was exploring whether Kambo in itself, not talking about any of the other sacred medicines, whether Kambo was in fact a poison, because Kambo often gets referenced as a poison. And one of the reasons why it gets referenced as a poison is, as you alluded to, because of the extreme physiological response that one goes through. So I can talk about that in a second. Another reason why people label it as a poison is because it's known, well, it is known in the jungle for snakes to ingest this particular frog. And the indigenous lore goes that when the snakes do grab a hold of this frog, because of its poison, the snake will spit it back out. It won't consume the frog. So because of the indigenous lore, also some of the pharmacology, what we know about the peptides, some people take what the peptides induce on a physiological level. And because of how we experience this particular medicine, that's why it also gets referenced as a poison. Now, the particular reframe that I like to give it, and so do many other people who work with this medicine, is a secretion. So it's not a poison in the sense that this particular medicine is full of peptides. And as I mentioned, the peptides have specific physiological responses in the body. So during a Kambo experience, it's not uncommon for people to heat up, to go through some sweating, swelling, to feel nauseous. Purging is a large part of the process. And when you're experiencing all of these effects, it can certainly seem like the body has been poisoned and it is trying to expel what it is that you've taken into the body. But these peptides are actually inducing these specific responses. So one particular peptide will induce tachycardia, a racing of the heart. Another peptide will induce vasodilation, so the arteries will expand. And with the arteries expanding and the racing of the heart, you might get pulsing, thudding, oscillating sensations in the body or up in the head. Then comes the sweating. Another peptide will induce gastric acid secretion and also smooth muscle contraction, which all adds to the purging process. So I guess I'm kind of getting into some of the sequential kind of experiential steps of how this medicine works and why we do consider it to be a beneficial secretion rather than a poison. So one of my teachers has taken an exuberant amount of Kambo before, and so have some particular indigenous folk, according to the indigenous law, you know, the stories and the myths that come out of the jungle and make their way over here to the West. And as far as we know, there is no specified, what they call LD50. There's no specified dose where if you take up to this amount, then it may be fatal to the system. Now, of course, there are deaths associated to Kambo, just like there are deaths associated to many of the other medicines, whether it's ayahuasca or whether it's iboga or whether it's psilocybin mushrooms. Just because these deaths are associated to a particular medicine, it doesn't mean that they have caused the death. Correlation, not causation. But anyways, I could keep waffling on, but what I am getting at is that is the particular reframe that we use. Secretion. I mean, language is such a huge part of how we are contextualizing these particular medicines and this particular world within a societal and cultural context that doesn't have a reference point for this world. So we have to be we have to pay particular mindfulness or give particular awareness to how we are using language and how we are presenting them to the larger field of the collective, so that so they can be better understood within their appropriate context. Sorry, that was a big ramble there.
I live for the rambles. You said it within there, correlation versus causation. Is that the word that you used? I like that. And that's just interesting because I've recently was listening to a podcast about COVID, which is still going on right now, around over in the States, the numbers are actually bigger than what's actually there. If someone gets hit with a bus, but they have symptoms of COVID, they'll actually get diagnosed as death by COVID because there's a possible conspiracy theories, but overall there's stimulus packs for the hospital to actually get money for COVID. But I like here, because we hear so many stories. It's so scary when you're younger, or even to this age, if you've never done psychedelics, you've never done any kind of spirit medicine, plant medicine, spirit teachers, that there's this death comes with it, or these bad trips, and they're poisons and they're blah, that, the languaging keeps us in a state of fear. But usually if you do it and it's facilitated quite correctly, you feel the moment in there going, oh no, this is exactly right for me. And maybe everyone else should do it is definitely a thing I have in there. I
was also going to touch on something as well that both Elise and Joel have mentioned. Joel was touching on the importance of set and setting, the mindset and the setting that we are experiencing these experiences within. And also, I'm not sure what particular word that you used, Elise, but the sense that I was getting was the importance of, when we're looking at something as being medicine and cracking the shell and opening us up into our hearts, that, well, it's multidimensional. It's the set and the setting. It's the intention towards it. It's having the appropriate awareness. It's having the right language and the right context to slot these experiences into. So I guess what I'm getting at is that it is just multidimensional when we're approaching this world and coming at it from the context of them being medicines.
Yeah, it's such a big word. It's just such a massive thing. And just continuing to hear different people in the different categories that I've been talking about on here is just languaging. And there's a certain one I just realized maybe I'm doing wrong, saying Cambo. That's wrong? Is that not right? Because you're saying Cambo? How are you saying it?
I pronounce it Cambo. So Cambo goes by many different names and many different articulations of the voice as well. But most people in Australia say Cambo.
It's very Aussie, very Ocker.
It's super Aussie, isn't it? Yeah. But I say Cambo. So in the jungle, they generally say Campo or something to that degree.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
And to tie off the poison talk is the languaging, Elise, of in alcohol, the pick your poison. I'm not sure if you've heard that before, and what your stances are around alcohol as poison.
I don't generally see alcohol as a poison, and know that, you know, you can get alcohol poisoning if you drink excessively. But, you know, that's at like a really far end of the scale. And when I think about alcohol, I like to think about it from the beginning, which is, you know, this reaction between yeast and sugar and water, that essentially from the beginning, it's life. You know, it's the creation of life. And I do this myself at home when I ferment. I take, you know, the skin of ginger, a little bit of sugar and some filtered water, and that the ginger skin will have, you know, natural yeast on it that actually causes that fermentation to start. And so, you know, rather than seeing alcohol as a poison, which yes, it can be, I often think about alcohol as life. And there's aquavite, which is, you know, kind of like similar to grappa in a way, that, you know, it's called the water of life. And I think, you know, really it's the same as any of the plant medicines that we're speaking about here today. It's, again, it comes back to setting, you know, the dosage and the way that we're using it. And with alcohol, if we do drink excessively, then, you know, we will perhaps get alcohol poisoning. I think definitely in larger amounts. And alcohol is definitely different to a lot of these other medicines that we're talking about, because of, I do believe, like the chemical properties are more, what's the word? Yeah, they do more obviously create that poisoned effect rather than, this is actually really interesting. I've never thought about this. And like, as I'm speaking, I'm kind of, you know, processing my answer, because I'm seeing correlations now between the purgative effects of like ayahuasca and cambo and other medicines. And, you know, when I have drank excessively, you know, you throw up. So it's like, hey, is it the same or is it not? Now I'm starting to question that. I saw myself speaking from a perspective of what I thought I should say, but actually I don't really have I think I have to feel more into that. Thank you. That's something to think about. But I do want to say, I never recommend people to drink excessively for a medicinal. Like, I would never recommend that. That's no. I don't think that's a responsible thing to do. Yes. So I'm not 100% sure, but it's an interesting thing to think about.
It's a question to marinate on.
Yeah.
So within these contexts, and like keeping that correlation between everything being a medicine and sitting in circle and creating ceremonies and ritual with different medicines, I'm curious to know if one you have, or two, if you plan on with your launch of Madlore to create some kind of ceremonial experience with that's open to public, as in a ticketed event or a free event, and how you would facilitate that to maybe reframe the ways that people ingest alcohol, and as it's to mostly promoted as a party drug, or they don't label it a drug, but a party substance, liquid, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I have thought about this, but at this point in time, I don't think that I'll be, you know, running like kind of a, you know, a medicine circle style thing with alcohol. It doesn't sit well for me at this point in time. Everything's open to changing. But what I have been doing is creating bespoke elixirs for people. So for example, someone will contact me and say, hey, I'm working on, self-love, or I have, this is going on for me and I'm looking at, healing that aspect, or I just really would love to have like a personalized elixir. And so I'll either channel like the herbs and things that, want to come through to support that person, or I'll channel the essence of the person and put that into a herbal form. And then I have been, instructing my clients on how to use this for themselves in their own home, in a ritual aspect. So I will always instruct my client to only consume around 60 mils of this alcohol that's around 10%, so lower than wine. And then to, go into a ritual space with their own intention and either meditate or dance or, whatever is their own way of self-connection. And I've had, some people share with me some really beautiful results from doing this, from, healing some wounds with, their relationship with their mother, to just falling back in love with themselves by tasting their own essence, or, having their mind make new connections and build more awareness. It's been really wonderful to receive that feedback. And then in the future, I also want to put together an online course around teaching people how to create their own magical elixirs. So how to tune into, find out which ones want to be in the elixir, teaching them how to, do infusions, make shrubs, even make non-alcoholic versions with these, herbal elixirs, because I think that's important as well. But when it comes to actually doing like a ritual medicine space, that feels super edgy for me. It's something that I need to think about. That's super to do, actually.
So you would say in that certain category, it's more like you would be open to people that do facilitate experiences like that you could actually channel something to birth to them. An example would be is like, say something that's like common among our community of people is like dancing eros. If they were going to put on a sort of one-off event, you could maybe create something that would align to have at their event, is something that's...
Yeah, absolutely. So I did the spiral with a beautiful woman named Steph Rose Freeman a few months ago. And most of you might know who Steph is. And she's an artist, and probably one of her most well-known art pieces is called The Vestibule. And so it's a painting of a vestibule of a church with a woman's legs open, because the vestibule is actually the opening to the vagina as well as the opening of a church. And so after working with people in like such a strong way, I like to create devotional drinks for them. And what happened with Steph was that I was just one day at home, and then what happens to me is the drinks will just drop in. And I felt this blend come through. It's rhubarb, lavender, and morning glory and passion flower. And after that came in, I just felt warm and felt like what it would taste like. And I saw, the picture of the vestibule just in my mind's eye. And I knew that was a drink for the vestibule. And Steph wants me to serve this drink at an exhibition that she's going to hold soon. So this
wonderful.
Is something that I want to do, just creating bespoke drinks that really represent people. And it's like, it's weird. It's alchemy, right? It's like, this is a drink, but it's for words, it's for people. So.
I love that. I would love to see more of that at events, because sometimes I am at these more consciously driven events. I'm like, I could actually go for a wine. But it's like alcohol is Voldemort at certain conscious events, It's like, no, you could never, because of alcohol and spirituality don't go together in certain people. But I feel like we could evolve past that if we're putting in so much work with ourselves that those two aren't a colliding experience.
I'm just thinking, if you were interested, I could make contemplating mortality for the funeral for you. Just putting it out there. Yeah.
Yes, it's a yes from me. It's a yes from me. I'd have to. It'd have to be like, I don't think I could just have a stall there where everyone just gets out of the grave, has a drink, jumps back in. But I definitely like a ceremonial experience. That I would love that. Something I'd like to ask, and just around this channeling, for instance, you're saying with Steph, and a story that I've heard through the grapevine, not personally from you, and you may or may not be open to it, and I may or may not be wrong, is the story of Ode to Loki. Would you be open to sharing about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, so Loki is the god of mischief, and he is the brother of Odin in Norse mythology. Oh, God, take my breath. So Loki was the name of my daughter who passed away at birth 4.5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And originally during that pregnancy, we thought that we were having a boy, and his name was always going to be Odin, because there was a lot of correlation between him and that name. And then when I was around 6 months pregnant, I had an out-of-body experience where I felt Odin's soul leave my body and another unknown soul come in. And when the baby was born, we named her Loki, because for so many reasons. So, being the god of mischief, it was like we never knew if the whole time there was a larger plan for her to not make it Earthside. And so there was always like this unknowing. And that whole experience with Loki really taught me about just not labeling things as positive and negative. And it helped me face the prospect of my own death as well. And so, yeah, the Ode to Loki is essentially like the whole essence of this brand. My brand would not have been birthed if it wasn't for that experience. So the main archetype that I work with is Loki, and the shapeshifter, and Loki's the shapeshifter. And then also in the herbal realm, I work with wormwood a lot, because what I do is make vermouth, and wormwood has that same essence of, the mischief maker and the shapeshifter, and the one that, the devil's advocate, essentially. So, that's how, this whole thing was birthed. And I feel like, it's a really important part of my message is to make lemonade out of what might seem like lemons.
Thank you for sharing. It's really beautiful to know that, like you said, there's more life. There's more life in that situation that you've created, and it's so beautiful to have, because I tried the Ode to Loki within that concoction of many drinks that end up at my house, and I remember like having it and being like, there's something like really different about this drink here. I'm getting something, and Alpha, I think Alpha must have had it, or someone told me the story, and I was like, oh wow, like there's a taste, I can taste that there's a specific story to this. So thank you.
So heartwarming.
And we've talked a lot earlier about poison and the effects that can have on us, and a bad trip, and these like downloads that we can have, these transmissions, and with people that take psychedelics, commonly, maybe like more stereotypically, if I talk in this like sort of vague area of stereotyping, I believe people that take psychedelics can have all this like incredible philosophy up here and like live up in these realms, but sometimes can't have a well integrated conversation, and maybe not be able to take on the actual juxtaposition of certain topics compared to certain people that may be a bit more versed in politics or have done maybe more personal development where they've gone through this in an unaltered state from a medicine that is external to their own body. And when I was looking at your website, Caiyu, I see that you have a online course, and within it, it says that you take people through integrations and exploring and preparing for certain trips, for certain experiences. I want to talk about the integration part, because even when I take psychedelics, for instance, like DMT, I know a lot of people have trouble afterwards actually explaining what the fuck happened. You know, in the moment, you're like, everything makes sense. And then you come back in and you're like, you tell whoever you're with, everything makes sense. I understand everything now. And they're like, oh, tell me what happened. And you're like, well, it's a bit hard to explain, but I'll give it a red hot crack, and it never really fully makes sense. And I guess I'm curious to know, within this integrating, how and if you get all this stuff that's up here, all this spirit and energy and whatnot, and bring it down into the body for it to actually be transmuted and translated and grounded within to the person that has been through this experience.
Yeah, expansive theme that we're touching on here, and I'm glad that you brought it up. It's interesting that you brought it up, because I was going to touch on it myself, and I was actually going to I was going to elucidate the importance of integration in light of everything that we're talking about, and I was actually going to pose that question to all three of you.
Beat you.
You beat me. Yeah, so one of the catchphrases that I tend to use is, great integration starts with great preparation. Yeah, and when I talk about preparation, if we just want to give a very kind of broad brushstroke of what I'm talking about here, I tend to categorize it into the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. And of course, underneath those 4 pillars, or we could even put energetic in there as well, those 5 pillars, could extrapolate many, many times over. There's many tributaries from each of those rivers that we could go down and explore. For example, when we are talking about the physical, just to give a couple of examples, we could be talking about movement practices, taking care of our actual physical body in that way. We could be talking about nutrition. It could be talking about grounding practices. So you get the sense of how we start to look at all of these pillars, and it branches off in many different ways. So what I might do is throw that particular theme back to you, Reese, back to you, Paisley, and see where you want to take that further.
What I would like to take on, I think it's the mental that I would actually like to first explore, because similar in a way of like having a catchphrase, a statement that I always return to is like, knowledge without integration is just intellect, you know, and sometimes all this stuff sits in here and we're meant to be so articulate, but it's not. To me, intellect sometimes doesn't make sense if it's not in my body. So to be able to actually take these very vast experiences, I believe majority of people are used to just knowing this in here, you know, like it's not a full body experience for a lot of people when they take psychedelics. Maybe I don't want to generalize to everyone else, but for me, even when I first taken psychedelics, it was all just happening in here, but I just had no idea how to put all of this into my body and to be able to respond rather than react. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So the first thing that comes to mind is that it's so very natural in a sense for all of us to be up here thinking about these things, up in our cogitations, because as a Western culture, that is where we spend the majority of our time. It's up here in the head. Like we know through doing a lot of this self-development work, I'm sure you guys will resonate to some degree, that a large part of that is about connecting to the body. It's about connecting with our feelings, our emotions, to our heart. And people are, you know, we over rationalize, we overthink things. So, you know, I think to dive into this particular theme, it's nuanced, and it really depends on what someone's intention is coming into it in the first place. Because if you're just talking mental and you're talking about kind of grasping what's up here in the great mystery, in these spiritual dimensions, and grounding it back into the body, it's almost like we're placing placing too much of our awareness on what the visual or the visionary experience is. We're giving that too much significance rather than looking at the gold, perhaps, that has been scattered before us in the form of learning how to connect more deeply with our body, or the traumas that we experienced when we were a child, or the repressed emotions or feelings that we've been, you know, putting a lid on for however many years. So I'm not sure that's really an answer.
Okay, yeah. Okay, I'm finding the thread here. So because of when I say like everything's okay, I understand everything, right? When we have these psychedelic experiences, when I have had these psychedelic experiences, but it wears off because of the traumas and the patterns and the conditioning is still in my body. You know, like it's like, whatever happened to me, whatever my stories are, when I'm tapped into this source, this connection, this God, whatever it is that happens in plant medicine, there's this moment of being like, everything's okay. But then after a while, it comes back to being in the body and these stories need working on. I'm curious to know how you're letting people integrate this, like everything is okay, into like actually unpacking some of the stuff and moving through the wounds that once were not okay, if you're doing that at all.
Yeah, that is a large part of what I'm doing. To further kind of to really deepen into this theme, what I would love to do is actually hear what either Elise or Joel has to say in reference to what you're saying. And maybe we can expand upon from there.
Well, I know for me, like you say, you know, like you've got the whole download and everything's coming through and you understand everything. And you may have 1,000,001 realizations in that journey. But I find for me personally, and then what I try to convey to anyone that I sit medicine with, is that you will have all of these realizations in your head, but only one or two of them will really land in your body as a physical feeling. And so that's where the integration work begins, on what's landed in really physically during that session. And that's where I focus the integration from what has really hit home in the body.
And are you doing that through like how are you helping people engage in that, in a manner of like, example how I imagine that could happen is like talking about it in circle afterwards, having an unpack, and then helping go, okay, it sounds like this is the thing that you've actually grasped. Let's unpack that one rather than further. This one over here hasn't feel like it's fully landed for you. Let's focus on this particular.
Let's focus on what's real and what you're, you know, like what's kind of not still in the other realm, but what you've brought back with you.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Elise, do you have anything to say on this topic?
Yeah. I can only speak from like my own personal medicine journeys because I don't facilitate. But what I have noticed is becoming more embodied in my daily life just generally has really helped me sit with the medicine in ceremony and actually integrate it into my body. And I have noticed that in the past, when I would sit in ceremony with ayahuasca, I would instantly react with fear and even like force myself to purge just to get rid of it, because it was such a mental experience for me. But I have been retraining myself to, you know, create this internal level, like of safety within my body, so that I can sit with the medicine deeper. And I find that now my journey is a more an embodied experience. I'm moving a lot during my ceremonies and moving the medicine around my body. And I find by doing that, I'm actually integrating the metaphor of the medicine, because quite often, using ayahuasca as an example, she doesn't really speak in direct terms, and we have to decipher these metaphors for ourselves, feel them in our body, and then in our daily life allow them to unfold naturally and make our own connections around what that was all about. And I do think it's, really about having, again, that deep sense of awareness and finding our own truths.
Mm-hmm.
And there's other medicines, like for me personally, like psilocybin is more direct. I can ask them questions and they'll answer me directly, whereas ayahuasca is a bit more metaphorical.
Mm-hmm.
But Kai, what you were speaking about before in terms of having a great setup, if we're using the intention that we're taking into the ceremony as like a structure, then everything that happens in the ceremony makes more sense. And the integration makes more sense because we have a reference point on what was healed, because like that intention is just so important. And, if we're drinking unintentionally, I do see the benefit in that sometimes if it's from a pure place, but, sometimes drinking unintentionally can not be for the right reasons. So yeah, I do believe that, it's super important to have that foundational intention in place.
Mm-hmm.
A good integration.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think the reason why I was going around in a roundabout way before, Paisley, was because it is so nuanced. And I already said this before, but it really depends on what someone's intention is coming into these experiences as to how they're going to integrate. Because for someone, it might be about taking a look at the patterns and programs on a mental level and having a look at all of the dysfunctional beliefs. And then for someone else, it might be coming into these experiences to work on a lot of their emotional baggage or their emotional trauma. And for another person, it could be about spiritual expansion and nature connection. And for someone else, it could be physical illnesses and sickness. So it really depends on how someone is going to integrate and the practices that they are going to implement on a daily basis as to how they're going to come to that place of whether it's holistic health or just holistic wholeness in a place that's truly aligned to someone's values, to their virtues, to their heart, to their soul, to spirit.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Intention is super duper important. And we've continued, this has been a big theme of what we've talked about, and also subtlety. Like we've talked about the subtle, the listening, the understanding, the embodiment. I'm curious to know, because there's this other side with like spirit teachers, and this might open a whole can of worms that will take this podcast from currently sitting at 2 hours to 10 hours, but see how we go. Is like, so for instance, with DMT, there's reported experiences of people connecting with extraterrestrial sources. And it's a big thing I believe a lot of people chase. Is like, I want to shoot through, I want to lift the veil, I want to blah. And, this was my intention one time. But I was like, it was the first time I had done anything psychoactive after my experience where I labeled it an overdose. And it was starting to happen. And I was... I was at a beach in Byron. And it was just like the worst metaphor that could have happened for me. Once I started to shoot through, I didn't want to. I was in that, like Elise said, the fear state of like, no, I want to purge it out. I don't want to do it anymore. I'm trying to physically grab onto like something to get a grip on reality, and I grab onto sand and it's slipping from my hands. I was like, this is the worst metaphor ever. No, why did I do this at the beach? And I had a whole experience. It was amazing. But and then I spoke to my mentor in that area. I'm like, hey, like I can't let go of this fear of possibly going down that well of what I considered a bad trip, an overdose, like that. I can't take on this activity. I go too far into the shadow where I'm not willing to surrender into it. I feel like I'm actually gonna overdose. actually is midway through this one question. I have another question to ask. Is with mushrooms and with DMT, personally myself, when I feel like I've had too much, my saliva gets extremely warm and hot, and I take that as a sign that something bad's about to happen. Can someone tell me what the fuck that is? What if that is a common thing, or if that's just me? Does anyone know what that is, or if that's a thing?
No, might just be you. I've never experienced it.
Does it feel like you're about to purge?
No, it doesn't feel like a spewing kind of experience. It's just that it gets really like hot, like not like tea hot, but like it's like really slimy warm, like, and I don't know what the fuck's going on.
No, I'm not familiar with that. But whether it's a physiological response or just a perceived physiological response, it sounds like that there was the emotional attachment that was placed onto it that has linked it into a fearful experience that you're going into.
Yeah, I get it sometimes. And like recently, I just feel like just push through it, just move through it and be okay with it and trust that if something fucking bad is going to happen, just it's going to happen. Continuing it on is, so I ask him, hey, how do I overcome this? And he's like, you just haven't had enough. It's like, have more and just bypass that fear that you have, and you have no choice but to surrender.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do it. This was like 4 years ago. I was like, I will, but I'm going to continue to train for a while, for doing that. What's your thoughts on that? Like, because I'm more of a person who's like less is more at the moment, where someone's advice is like more is gonna just give you no choice but to have the experience you want.
It sounded like you were in agreement there for a second, Joel. What I was going to say quickly is that perhaps he was making that suggestion because he thought that you were in a place where you could actually receive more, because that's not a suggestion that I would necessarily give to anyone with that. Yeah, of course.
He always gives me what he knows I can. It's always been a like, okay, now you can do this, now you can do that. But I just, myself personally, sometimes people advise you, but you still can't take on the advice. Joel, you were going to say something, or you were in agreement to that advice?
I was. I mean, sometimes I know that whether it's for myself or even people I'm facilitating for, if I can feel they're right on the edge, I won't push, but I will suggest, maybe you want another cup of medicine, maybe you want another 3 grams of mushroom, maybe you want another hit of DMT. Maybe you want to smoke double the amount of chunga. And once you're there, you've got no option other than surrender to the experience.
Yeah, in one sense, it seems I totally get that perspective. And again, it's nuanced. It depends on the person, because in one sense, that could be a very forced kind of surrender. I'm thinking of Leonidas kicking someone into the well, saying, this is Sparta. It's very, very forceful. It's almost like a very masculine way of working with the medicine. It's drive, it's penetrate. Whereas there's another part of me that would love to say there is great medicine and great importance for us to be able to surrender in many different feeling states of being, whether it's during mild states of discomfort, if we're talking about sacred medicine experiences, or whether we're in moderate experiences, or whether we're right on the threshold, or whether we're super deep. There's really great medicine to be able to let go of whatever it is during whatever is coming, because that's life. Life ebbs and flows and shifts. That's tuning into nature, the seasonal cycles. Everything is in a death and rebirth process. And the more that we can align to nature, whatever that is in the moment, and come into that place of surrender, the better we're going to be for it.
Yeah, I guess that always comes back to, the medicine giving you exactly what you need at the time.
Do you feel like, for instance, can you get caught in like staying in the exact same medicine? Like, for instance, if I just continue to like sit in that like warm saliva, losing reality, fight, come back, like, do you believe there's ways to resist the medicine as well, like to not actually allow medicine? So it's not really, for instance, giving you what you actually want or what it's meant to give, because you can actually fight it.
Even in that, there's medicine within that. The illumination is there to be able to see our tendency to hold on or to resist whatever it is that wants to come through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. Fine. Okay. Yeah, well, let's take it to that next part and see where we go from there. Is that shoot through, the connection to extraterrestrials, the Rick Strassman, like what he's documented, and I think right now actually they've got I feel like I recently heard that he's being like government funded to get astronauts like hooked up to IVs on DMT and start mapping out the consciousness and these fields of aliens, is what I most recently heard with him. What's everyone's beliefs, experiences, theories on this, breaking through and meeting these aliens and insects that can dissect us and communicate with us?
I've personally never met aliens.
Mm-hmm.
I have encountered plenty of insects, dwarves, small people, fae, like earth spirits, on huge doses. But I definitely believe that there are, there's medicine and there's teachings to be learnt from what is far beyond this realm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I only personally have one experience with aliens, and it just freaked the absolute living daylights out of me. So, this was in Peru during an ayahuasca ceremony. I just really let myself surrender, and that wasn't something that I was accustomed to doing or felt comfortable doing. And yeah, I felt myself shift from, reality state to a different place. And I felt myself drifting up, and this kind of circle opened up and I saw like two bluish gray aliens. And then they looked like they were really shocked to see me. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if I panicked and, wanted to fight the experience of being there, or if they didn't want me there, if I had invaded their space. But yeah, all of a sudden I fell back into my body and had like a really terrible reaction, and I was purging for hours and screaming. It was horrible. But, I do believe that, if we are going to discover aliens, which obviously we already have, that, it's the way is through the subconscious and into the collective consciousness. So yeah, it's super interesting, but it scares the fuck out of me.
Thank you. Caiyu, you got anything you'd like to share on this particular topic?
Yeah, I'll throw my 2 cents in. There have been many experiences where I have encountered interdimensional entities, aliens, ancestor spirits, call them what you will. In most of my communions, my engagements with ayahuasca, we'll have conversations or communions, experiences with beings of all sorts. So this has been going on for many years now. So it's certainly not a foreign thing to me. It's the same with Wachuma as well, psilocybin. I think, it's a strange thing for us to get kind of caught up on, because if you look at it from a shamanic lens or an indigenous lens, this is just regular life. It's like, yeah, of course this exists. And I think because we are still trying to, in the West, find our sense of indigeneity to where we belong. And also we're trying to reclaim or regain a sense of our connection to spirit, or our connection to nature. So of course, when we come across And we're being so steeped in this anthropocentric worldview where humans are at the very center of everything, and also this Cartesian perspective towards self, between the gap, the split between mind and body, or between humanness and otherness, as if humans are the only ones with such an advanced level of sentience or consciousness, and that everything else out there doesn't have that level of spirit. It's very, very common for a lot of people to see, or rather to not see, our world as a living, breathing, animate landscape. So I think because we don't have that disconnect, there is such a fascination on the interdimensional beings and the aliens and the life forms, because, well, not many people experience that.
It's not normal to us. Yeah, it's not our everyday. Yeah, it's a big fascination. I think it's to me and a lot of people that are around me, it's one of those things, like, you just want to see it once, like just give me aliens once, and then I'll journey the other stuff with ayahuasca. I just need to just know that this is true, But I also don't want Elise's experience of seeing them fucking being terrified and then having a horrible experience afterwards. Yeah. And that's what's like, for instance, hearing about this Strassman experiment that's happening at the moment. I'm terrified of doing like a full hit of DMT, let alone being on an IV and like extending out the experience. Just like, I don't know, I didn't see how long they're going in for, but I'm also just curious to hear how people feel about that being like, being on a drip of DMT. Like, would you do it? Would you go in? Would you be one of Strassman's fucking guinea pigs?
Me personally, I probably wouldn't. me and Joel are on other sides of the polarity.
I definitely would.
Oh man, terrifying. Elise, would you do it?
No, thank you.
Joel, why would you?
I think the question, it's not why would I, but why wouldn't I?
Okay.
Like, if I had the ability to explore that space for longer, then I'd like to take that opportunity.
Yeah, it's annoying because as much as I say I wouldn't, if I was personally invited to do it, I would, and I'd be very upset with myself. But I couldn't say no. I couldn't not take the opportunity to be like part of this groundbreaking experiment, I guess. But I have a strong argument for a no. I'm curious to hear both of your no's, Caiyu and Elise.
Do you want to share, Elise?
Yeah, just in my personal experience, I have found for me that plant medicines can re-traumatize me in a way. On my personal journey, I have been using plant medicines for healing trauma. And what I've noticed is that if I take too large a dose, I do feel re-traumatized because it pushes me past a point of internal safety. And so what I've noticed for myself is I've gone from, trying to push the boundary to now I know how much I can have, what feels safe in my body, and how to, build a level of like internal self-support for me and, meet my own needs. And so, being on a drip of DMT with someone else, organizing the dose, not sure I'd feel comfortable with that. However, from like a perspective on the other side of that, if I could like feel safe with the dosage and feel safe with the level of like exploration that was initiating for me, yes, I definitely love to do that. Like, yes, would I love to explore like the alien realm? Fuck yeah. But it's just the that re-traumatization that I do feel sometimes when I'm taking medicines. So,
yeah. That's the part of my no argument. That's definitely a big part of my no argument. And you, Caiyu?
When I think of the reason why I answered no, what I come back to is what would be my intention. So Joel, you were saying, why wouldn't I do it? And then the opposite side of that is, why would I do it? And that comes into the attention. So it's like, okay, well, why would I? What reason would I have to undertake this particular experience? And perhaps, 4 or 5 years ago, I would have jumped at the chance. But as I've deepened down this path, I don't really feel that curious pull to experience a lot of different kinds of consciousness altering states just for curiosity's sake. I've been there and I've done that, and I've pushed the boundaries to a large degree. And that time may come again, but that's not where I'm at this stage of life at the moment.
Totally. I definitely hear that. And there's certain areas where I feel that, but this one I feel like is too big for me to say no to. Sorry, you're about to say something, Joel?
I think like my main pull would be, I guess, much the same reasons I do like Wachuma and ayahuasca journeys, is I feel there's a greater chance to integrate while you're still in the journey. And so therefore, I think being in that DMT realm for a longer period of time would give me more of a chance to integrate what's coming through while in the experience.
Yeah, totally. That I feel like that's a big part of mine as well, is just like a longer time in something that is just so much for me to take on. So earlier we've touched on pharmaceuticals. I'm curious to know, like, I sort of avoid them at most cost, and it's I don't even have that much knowledge on them, but I just don't feel good when I take them. And for instance, you can sort of see I got like some cysts removed from my head, and I had to take some local anesthetic, is that what you call it? And like, it'd been years since I'd had anything injected into me. Recently, I had to get a can't remember what it was, but I got another injection, and like, it makes me feel like sick, and not in the way that some plant medicines do for me, but like in a way like my body wants this out of me ASAP. Even sometimes with Panadol, when I have to take them, for instance, I have to take them, they say, for this, but I've avoided it. I'm curious to hear, for all of you that journey with different plant medicines, what your stances are on taking pharmaceuticals, and if you are totally okay with them, if it's a subjective experience, depends, whatever it is, how your relationship with pharmaceutical drugs and medicine are. This is an open one, whoever feels to jump on it first.
I generally don't use pharmaceuticals unless I'm, like going to hospital or having a local anesthetic for an operation or something along those lines. Mainly for the effect that they have on my digestive system. And then all of the other problems that issue from that, because, all of a sudden you're constipated, and therefore you're not drinking enough water. It doesn't matter how much fiber you're not passing properly, so it causes imbalances in the gut biome. So I tend to, where possible, go to plants.
Yeah. Do you have any, like, for instance, like when you do have to do them, this is again for everyone else continues on that, but do you have certain plant remedies that you take before or after to help when you have to take them? For instance, like you said, when you're about to have an operation where you have to have these local anesthetics that help assist you on the journey, that maybe help the pharmaceuticals to pass through your body quicker or heal what they've done that you don't like about them?
I'll jump in again. On the lead up and lead out, I will generally go with fairly heavily probiotic or fermented foods and really kind of get my gut health so that my digestive system is functioning at a really high point where everything's moving rather rapidly, and make sure my hydration's, I guess I'd say overly hydrated, which I find for me personally helps me move a lot of the chalks and a lot of the residue buildups from pharma medicines through my body.
Wonderful. Good to know. These are things that I always want to know, but I never want to research. And that's a part of this podcast, because I'm best learning by just conversation. So thank you. Yeah. Either of you to have anything to chime in on your experiences with pharmaceuticals?
Yeah, I do. So did you want to jump in first, Elise?
No, that's okay. Go ahead.
Okay, cool. Yeah, for myself, I don't think it's an either or scenario. It's not one thing or the other. On a personal level, I prefer not to take any pharmaceuticals, and I haven't done so in a long time. I think that nature provides everything that we need in one way or another, but in the same breath, the allopathic model of taking pharmaceutical drugs or medications. So you take this one particular thing and it sorts out this particular issue. I think that certainly has its place within certain contexts. I mean, if for whatever reason, if I happen to get sepsis in my leg or whatever from a nasty gash, or, a crocodile bit my leg off, I would certainly want to take the appropriate pharmaceutical medications for that. But I think it's got to be an integrated approach. I think there is certainly an overuse of the allopathic model and the pharmaceutical medication model, but we certainly need to be looking from a more holistic lens of perspective and coming back to nature as often as we can. We live in a world that's different from our ancestors, from the Paleolithic or from the Neolithic. We've got a lot more toxins and we've got a lot more problems and physical issues, physical sickness, mental, emotional stuff. So yeah, I think that pharmaceuticals certainly have a place in the world, but we over rely on them to a great degree. And oftentimes pharmaceutical medications are like a Band-Aid on a bullet wound for the most part. But not getting to the root cause of what caused the particular issue in the first place.
Band-Aid on a bullet wound. I love that. Yeah, I totally hear that. And well, I wish a lot of this was like just common knowledge in a manner of like, I wish I just had some kind of chart. I'm sure that out there, if I really looked, it's like, take this for when you have a headache. Take this for when you have digestion problems. Take this, rub this on this when you have this rash or whatever it is, that it was just as easy as when you go to the pharmaceutical store and go, excuse me, what do I take for this? And it's just there, rather than like having to find some kind of person that is well equipped with the knowledge of nature, and then they also have to point you in the direction of where to get it. So it's the convenience as well of pharmaceuticals that definitely play a part for me.
This is where people like Elise and Joel come in with a lot of their remedies and herbs that they're working with. I mean, when we're talking about pharmaceuticals, what are we talking about? It's antibiotics, antibacterials, antiparasitics, anti-inflammatories. It's like we can find all of these in the herbs, in the plants.
And I mean, most of our pharmaceuticals are plant derived anyway. So like, let's just go back.
Yeah.
Before and just go straight to the plant material.
Elise?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if we are looking at alcohol from a literally medicinal perspective, what I make fortified wines or vermouth was essentially first used as a medicine because of in the herbs that have really high bitter characters for that digestion and inflammation. And one herb that I really love using, or root, it's called gentian. It's super bitter and it's amazing for digestion. And and like, just ginger for inflammation and all that kind of stuff as well. It's just, all this information is available, and there's so much stuff that's just available at the local greengrocer that we can go and and get and and just ingest to feel better. So there's always something that's easily accessible as well.
Yeah, it's just it's the common knowledge that I would love to see more of it, and that's what's so beautiful to have this conversation, because for me, a lot of this stuff I think about a lot, but I just don't research, and I just always learn so much quicker by having the conversation, so I can actually participate in it rather than just have to read it. I feel like this is off topic, but like I always have this theory that with school, from having to learn so much that I'm not interested in, that anything that I am interested in now, just the brain, like the neuropath is just like, you don't want to learn this. And it's so hard to fucking overcome for me. I'm still doing my absolute best to overcome that, like the not wanting to learn what I actually want to learn. And that's why it's so cool to also have the intuitive knowing that is a large part of shamanism and working with nature-based products. Just wondering if I have any more questions I want to ask before we wrap up, but in even giving a chance in the wrap up, if anyone else has anything they want to ask or share, but I'm feeling the space slowly close right now.
There's nothing off the top of my head or heart that's feeling called to come through at the moment.
Yeah, I feel complete as well.
Yeah, no, I think we've covered a lot of base.
We've covered a lot. I'm really fucking stoked. I almost, just for transparency, I started writing an email earlier today saying, hey, I have to reschedule just because I just had so many things going on. I was like, I'm going to reschedule this. And as I'm writing, I'm like, I can't do it. As much as I want to reschedule this, I can't fucking do it. I'm so glad that we stuck to it. I stuck to it. I really appreciate all of you coming through with this. For anyone that's listening, check out in the descriptions to each platform, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Instagram, for each of their Instagrams, websites, to get more information. I actually want to give just like a quick moment to just, if you want to go around and just let anyone know what offerings you actually do have, because I know some of you have more than just the products themselves, or maybe there is a bit more that you can expound on the product, so people can actually more than just take knowledge away from this podcast, but actually have something that they can physically receive from you or to work further with you. Because I think there's a massive demand outside of just personal development, which is what I mostly work in, is to actually have people that are in touch with nature and different remedies, as I've just been speaking about with you, that is beyond pharmaceutical, that maybe you all could share with the audience. Joel, would you like to go first?
Yep, I guess mainly for what I do is largely herbal supplemental based and herbal medicines. So if anyone feels the call to work with, I guess, natural medicine, hit me up, whether it's on the website or Instagram. And then occasionally, semi-frequently, I'll hold either wajuma or psilocybin circles. So if anyone's in my local area and they're feeling the pull towards medicine, reach out and we can build from there.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elise, would you like to go?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so at the moment I'm offering a few different things. Madlore will be officially launching around October this year. So yeah, in the description, you'll be able to find the Instagram handle for Madlore, but also my personal page, which is elisewest.com. So at the moment I'm offering hypnotherapy. What I do is help people open up to their own internal realms, discovering the collective consciousness that exists within, and exploring past lives and alternate lives for healing and growth. I also have a little mini brand called Lanark, which I offer to create personalized bespoke elixirs for people, and then I also have pre-made elixirs that will have really poetic metaphorical meanings for people to journey with. And yeah, just those two now, and then Madlore's coming out in October.
Cool. So just to be clear with everyone, Madlore will be the major public brand of your alcoholic elixirs. Yeah. But what was the other one called for people to be able to participate in right now?
Yeah, Lanark. So L''Anarch. And that's going to be transformed into more tincture-based offering shortly.
Cool.
So that's available now.
Awesome. Thank you. And Caiyu?
Yes, if people want to reach out to me in regards to some of the sacred medicine ceremonial processes that we've talked about, you can reach out to me via the contact details on my website, medicinepath.net. On there, you will also find Sacred Psychedelics 2.0, which is my online course when it comes to integrating, exploring, and preparing for sacred medicine journeys. And there's about 250 people in that online course. And I think it's a really great resource for people who are wanting to step into the sacred medicine world and who are willing to put in that deep level of preparation to really have a great level of integration and exploration. And you can always come and connect with me on my Instagram or Facebook handles, which is Caiyuda Kiora.
Awesome. I also, just to plug yourself a little bit more, I saw you also have a free ebook, which was 65 ways something.
Yeah, that's an old ebook. It's certainly still holds relevance for people who are probably more on the self-development side of exploring sacred medicines. It's 65 questions to contemplate before and after the psychedelic experience.
Awesome.
So you can jump over to my website and that's a free download. It's pretty easy to find.
Yeah. All right. I am so happy with how this fucking turned out. You are a bunch of legends. I'm excited to hear how everyone receives this information, and hopefully there'll be some more collaboration in this manner, maybe with one another. And yeah, I'm so grateful that you wanted to come on and have this conversation with me.
No, thanks for opening it up.
Curious.
Absolutely.
She followed him and soon found herself falling a very deep hole into a strange place called Curious.
Conversation.
Curious.
Conversation.